There were exactly 43 seconds between the moment Mikkel's fingers dug into Serafina's arm and the moment Lee Hyun-woo decided he was going to intervene. He'd spent years training himself not to get involved in other people's problems, not to let emotions cloud his judgment, not to risk his carefully constructed world for strangers. But something about the quiet resignation in her posture, the way she'd stopped fighting back, made every one of those rules feel meaningless. If you believe in second chances and love that breaks every rule, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that'll make your heart race. The restaurant hummed with quiet conversations and clinking silverware, but Serafina barely heard any of it. Her boyfriend's fingers dug into her forearm hard enough to bruise, and she fought to keep her expression neutral. They were in public. He wouldn't make a scene here. Probably, she thought. "You think I'm stupid?" Mikkel hissed, leaning closer. His breath smelled like whiskey, even though it was barely noon. "I saw how you looked at that waiter." She hadn't looked at anyone. She'd kept her eyes on her plate like she always did when Mikkel got like this, but explaining would only make it worse. It always made it worse. "I didn't. Don't lie to me." His grip tightened and she winced. "We're leaving now." At the table 3 spaces away, Hyun-woo set down his chopsticks with deliberate precision. His associate, Min-seok, paused mid-sentence when he noticed the shift in his boss's demeanor. Hyun-woo's expression hadn't changed, still calm and unreadable, but Min-seok had worked for him long enough to recognize danger when it appeared. "Sir?" Min-seok ventured carefully. Hyun-woo didn't respond. His attention was fixed on the couple near the window, specifically on the way the man's knuckles had gone white around the woman's slender wrist. She was beautiful, he noticed absently. Delicate features, warm brown skin, dark coils of hair, pulled back from her face. But it was the quiet resignation in her posture that made something cold and sharp settle in his stomach. He knew that look. He'd seen it in his own mother's eyes years ago, before she'd finally found the courage to leave his father, before the cancer took her anyway. "Check on them," Hyun-woo said quietly. Min-seok blinked. "Sir?" The couple, discreetly. Understanding dawned on Min-seok's face, followed quickly by concern. "That might not be wise. We're here for the meeting with—" "I said check on them." There was no heat in Hyun-woo's voice, but Min-seok stood immediately and made his way toward the restrooms, passing close enough to the couple's table to overhear their conversation. When he returned 2 minutes later, his expression was grim. "He's drunk," Min-seok reported quietly, accusing her of various things. She's trying to calm him down, but he's getting more aggressive. Hyun-woo's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "And she wants to leave with him." "She looks terrified, sir." That was all Hyun-woo needed to hear. He pulled out his phone, typed a quick message, and set it back on the table. Within 60 seconds, the restaurant manager appeared at the couple's table, wearing a practiced smile. "I'm terribly sorry," the manager said smoothly, "but we've had a complaint about a disturbance at this table. I'm going to have to ask you both to settle your bill and leave." Mikkel's face flushed an ugly red. "A disturbance? We haven't done anything." "Sir, please." The manager's smile never wavered. "Let's handle this quietly." Serafina felt her stomach twist with dread. Mikkel hated being embarrassed, and this would only fuel his anger later. She tried to stand, tried to smooth things over, but his hand clamped down on her shoulder and shoved her back into her seat. "We'll leave when I'm ready," Mikkel snarled. The manager's expression flickered with uncertainty, but before he could respond, a new presence appeared at the table. Serafina looked up and found herself staring at a man who seemed to command the air around him without saying a word. He was tall, broad-shouldered, impeccably dressed in a dark suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. But it was his eyes that caught her. Dark, intense, and fixed directly on Mikkel with an expression that made her boyfriend's grip on her shoulder loosen. "Is there a problem?" Hyun-woo asked quietly. His voice was smooth, almost pleasant, but there was something underneath it that made Serafina's pulse quicken. Not fear, exactly, but awareness. This man was dangerous in ways Mikkel could never be. "This is none of your business," Mikkel said, but his voice had lost some of its earlier aggression. Hyun-woo tilted his head slightly as if considering this. Then his gaze shifted to Serafina, and she felt the intensity of his attention like a physical touch. "Is that true? Is this none of my business?" She opened her mouth, unsure what to say, but Mikkel cut her off. "She's my girlfriend. We're having a private conversation." "I see." Hyun-woo's expression didn't change, but something in the temperature of the room seemed to drop. "And does your private conversation usually leave bruises on her arm?" Serafina glanced down and realized with a sinking feeling that dark marks were already forming where Mikkel had grabbed her. She pulled her sleeve down quickly, but it was too late. The stranger had already seen. Mikkel stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Who the hell do you think you are?" "Someone who doesn't appreciate watching a man put his hands on a woman." Hyun-woo's tone remained calm, almost conversational. "Especially in my favorite restaurant." The implied threat hung in the air between them. Mikkel seemed to realize finally that he was outmatched. He grabbed his jacket from the back of his chair and threw money on the table. "Come on," he snapped at Serafina, "we're leaving." But when she started to stand, Hyun-woo spoke again. "She can stay if she wants." The words were simple, but they hit Serafina like a shockwave. When was the last time someone had given her a choice? When had anyone ever stepped between her and Mikkel's anger? Mikkel laughed, harsh and bitter. "You think she's going to stay here with some stranger? She's coming with me." Hyun-woo didn't move, didn't raise his voice. He simply looked at Serafina again and asked, "Do you want to go with him?" The question should have been easy to answer. She should have said yes, should have followed Mikkel out before the situation got worse. But the stranger's eyes held something she hadn't seen directed at her in so long. Genuine concern. Like her answer actually mattered to him. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "I don't know." "Serafina." Mikkel's tone carried a warning she knew too well. "Let's go, now." Her name on the stranger's lips would have sounded different, she thought randomly. Softer, maybe. Less like a command and more like a question. "The lady seems uncertain," Hyun-woo observed. "Perhaps you should give her time to think. Perhaps you should mind your own damn business." Mikkel shot back, reaching for Serafina's arm again. He never made contact. Hyun-woo's hand caught Mikkel's wrist mid-reach, his grip iron tight. The movement was so fast, so smooth, that Serafina barely saw it happen. One moment Mikkel was reaching for her, the next he was frozen in place, his face going pale. "I'm going to give you one chance," Hyun-woo said quietly. "Walk away, now, and don't come back." "You're insane." "I'm patient," Hyun-woo corrected, "but not infinitely so." There was something in his voice now, something that made even Serafina's breath catch. This wasn't an empty threat. This was a promise. Mikkel jerked his hand free, stumbling backward. For a moment, he looked like he might try to argue, might try to reclaim some shred of his pride. But then his eyes darted around the restaurant, taking in the other diners who were now watching with undisguised interest, and he seemed to deflate. "This isn't over," he muttered, but he was already backing toward the door. "You hear me, Serafina? This isn't over." Then he was gone, and the silence he left behind felt deafening. Serafina stood frozen, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. A stranger had just protected her, defended her, given her a choice. And now Mikkel was gone, and she was standing in the middle of an expensive restaurant with no idea what came next. "Sit," Hyun-woo said gently, gesturing to her abandoned chair. "Please." She sat, mostly because her legs didn't feel steady enough to keep her upright. Hyun-woo took the seat across from her, the one Mikkel had vacated, and signaled the manager. "Bring her whatever she'd like," he said, "and some water." I should go," Serafina managed, even though the thought of leaving made her stomach twist. "He'll be waiting outside. He'll be angry. He won't touch you again." The certainty in Hyun-woo's voice made her look up. He was watching her with that same intense focus, like she was the only person in the room worth his attention. "You don't know him," she said quietly. "I know men like him." Hyun-woo leaned back in his chair, his posture relaxed but his eyes never leaving hers. "And I know they're cowards. He won't come back." "How can you be so sure?" "Because I'll make certain of it." The water arrived, and Serafina drank gratefully, buying herself time to think. Her hands were shaking, she realized. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving her feeling hollow and uncertain. "What's your name?" Hyun-woo asked after a moment. "Serafina." She set down the glass carefully. "Serafina Banda." "Serafina," he repeated, and yes, it did sound different in his voice. Better. "I'm Lee Hyun-woo." "Thank you," she said, because what else could she say? For what you did. You didn't have to get involved." "I know." Something in the way he said it made her chest tighten. He'd chosen to help her, chosen to step between her and Mikkel even though he had no reason to, no obligation. When was the last time someone had chosen her? "I should probably still go," she said, even though every part of her wanted to stay in this chair, in this moment where someone had made her feel safe. "I need to figure out things." "Do you have somewhere to go?" The question caught her off guard. Yes, my apartment." "Does he have a key?" Her silence was answer enough. Hyun-woo pulled out his phone and typed something quickly. "I'm sending someone to change your locks. They'll meet you there in an hour." "You can't just... I can't afford... I'm not asking you to pay." "But why would you..." "Because you need help," Hyun-woo said simply, "and I'm in a position to provide it." Serafina stared at him, searching for some hidden motive, some catch, but his expression remained open, almost gentle, like helping her was the most natural thing in the world. "I don't understand," she admitted. "Why do you care?" Hyun-woo was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. "My mother was afraid once," he said finally. "No one helped her. I swore I wouldn't let that happen to anyone else if I could prevent it." The raw honesty in his words made something crack inside her chest. She blinked back sudden tears, overwhelmed by everything. By Mikkel's cruelty, by the stranger's kindness, by the weight of choices she hadn't realized she could make. "Thank you," she whispered again. "Eat something," Hyun-woo suggested, gentler now. "Then I'll have my driver take you home. You'll be safe, I promise." And somehow, impossibly, Serafina believed him. Later that evening, after Hyun-woo's driver had escorted her to her apartment and waited while a professional locksmith changed every lock, Serafina sat on her couch and tried to make sense of the day. Her phone had 17 missed calls from Mikkel and twice as many texts, messages ranging from apologies to threats to desperate pleas. She'd blocked his number after reading the first few, but the knowledge that he was out there, angry and probably drunk, made her skin crawl. A soft knock at her door made her jump. "Miss Banda?" An unfamiliar voice called through the door. "I have a delivery." She peered through the newly installed peephole and saw a young man in a suit holding a large bag. Cautiously, she opened the door with the chain still attached. "I didn't order anything." "Compliments of Mr. Lee," the man said with a polite bow. "He wanted to ensure you had dinner." Serafina stared at the bag, then at the messenger, then back at the bag. Inside was enough Korean food to feed her for 3 days, along with a handwritten note on expensive cardstock. "You forgot to eat at the restaurant. This should make up for it." LHW below the note was a phone number. "If you need anything, and I mean anything, call me." She shouldn't keep the food. She shouldn't call the number. She should distance herself from Lee Hyun-woo and his unsettling intensity before she got pulled into something she didn't understand. But even as she thought it, she was bringing the bag inside, and the note was already tucked safely into her pocket. That night, she ate dinner alone in her apartment with her new locks and her blocked numbers, and a stranger's kindness keeping the darkness at bay. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, she didn't feel quite so afraid. The next morning, Serafina woke to sunlight streaming through her bedroom window and the strange, disorienting realization that Mikkel wouldn't be showing up unannounced. He couldn't. He didn't have a key anymore. The relief that washed through her was so intense, it almost felt like grief. She got ready for her shift at the university library in a daze, her mind circling back to yesterday's events. Lee Hyun-woo. She'd looked him up last night after finishing the food he'd sent. Curiosity. Winning out over caution. The search results had been illuminating and terrifying. He wasn't just wealthy, he was powerful. The kind of powerful that made people nervous. His name appeared in connection with exclusive clubs, political donations, business acquisitions. There were photos of him at charity galas, always in the background, always watching, never smiling. The articles were careful in their wording, but Serafina could read between the lines. Lee Hyun-woo was someone important, someone influential, someone you didn't cross, which made his intervention yesterday even more confusing. Why would a man like that care about her problems? Her phone buzzed as she locked her apartment door. Unknown number. Is your lock working properly? LHW. Her heart did something complicated in her chest. He was checking on her, actually checking to make sure she was safe. Yes. Thank you again for everything. She hesitated, then added, and for dinner. It was delicious. His response came, quickly. Good, call me if you need anything. She should leave it there. Should put her phone away and focus on getting through her day, but her fingers moved before her brain could stop them. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why are you helping me? The 3 dots indicating he was typing appeared, disappeared, appeared again. When his message finally came through, it was shorter than she'd expected. Because I want to. She stared at those 4 words for a full minute before putting her phone away. No ulterior motive, no expectations, just because he wanted to. The simplicity of it made her throat tight. The library was quiet when she arrived, just a few early students scattered among the stacks. Serafina threw herself into her work, shelving books and processing returns, grateful for the distraction. But her mind kept drifting back to dark eyes and a calm voice, and the way Hyun-woo had looked at Mikkel like he was something to be removed. Serafina? She turned to find her co-worker, James, watching her with concern. You okay? You've been shelving the same book for like 5 minutes. She glanced down and realized he was right. Sorry, distracted. Anything wrong? Yes, everything. Nothing. She didn't know anymore. Just dealing with some personal stuff. James nodded sympathetically. He was nice, friendly in an uncomplicated way that made her comfortable around him. They'd gotten coffee a few times after shifts, talked about classes and books and nothing important. It was easy. Safe. If you need to talk, he offered, I'm around. Thanks, James. I appreciate it. She went back to work, and the morning passed in a blur of routine tasks. By lunchtime, she'd almost convinced herself that yesterday had been some kind of fever dream. Men like Lee Hyun-woo didn't just appear in people's lives and fix their problems. Things like that didn't happen to girls like her. Then she stepped outside for her break and found a car waiting at the curb. An expensive car. And leaning against it, looking entirely too comfortable in his tailored suit, was Hyun-woo. Serafina froze mid-step. He noticed her immediately, his attention sharpening in a way that made her stomach flip. Serafina. What are you doing here? The question came out more breathless than she'd intended. Making sure you're all right. He straightened, and she was struck again by how tall he was, how his presence seemed to fill the space around him. Have you eaten? I was going to grab something. Join me. It wasn't quite a question, but it wasn't quite a command either, somewhere in between. And despite every logical reason she had to decline, Serafina found herself nodding. The restaurant he took her to was small and quiet, tucked away on a side street she'd never noticed before. The owner greeted Hyun-woo by name, led them to a private table in the back. Serafina felt out of place in her library uniform and practical shoes, but Hyun-woo didn't seem to notice. Or if he did, he didn't care. Order whatever you want, he said once they were seated. You don't have to keep buying me food. I know. His lips curved into something that might have been a smile. Almost. but I'm going to anyway. They ordered, and an awkward silence settled over the table. Serafina fidgeted with her napkin, hyper-aware of Hyun-woo's gaze on her. "You looked me up," he said eventually. Not a question. Her cheeks heated. Yes, sorry, I was just curious, I understand." He leaned back in his chair, somehow making even that simple movement look elegant. "Did you find what you were looking for?" "I don't know what I was looking for." "You wanted to know if you could trust me." The observation was uncomfortably accurate. And what conclusion should I have reached? Hyun-woo considered this. That I'm someone who keeps my promises, good or bad. That's not exactly reassuring. It wasn't meant to be reassuring. It was meant to be honest. Their food arrived, and Serafina busied herself with eating to avoid having to respond, but she could feel Hyun-woo watching her, patient and unhurried, like he had all the time in the world to wait for her to figure out whatever was happening between them. "Have you heard from him?" Hyun-woo asked after a few minutes. "Mikkel." He called, texted. I blocked him. "Good. He won't give up that easily. Then I'll make certain he understands he doesn't have a choice." The casual certainty in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, it made her feel protected, like someone had finally put themselves between her and the world's sharp edges. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked quietly. "And don't say because you want to." Hyun-woo set down his chopsticks, giving her his full attention. "When I saw him hurting you yesterday, I felt something I haven't felt in a very long time." "What?" "Rage." He said it calmly, like he was discussing the weather, and underneath that, the need to keep you safe, to make sure no one ever made you afraid again. "You don't even know me." "Not yet." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. "But I'd like to." Serafina's pulse hammered in her throat. This was too much, too fast. Men like him didn't want to know girls like her. There had to be a catch, an angle she wasn't seeing. "I should get back to work," she said, even though her lunch break wasn't over yet. "Of course." Hyun-woo signaled for the check without argument, but his eyes never left hers. "Can I drive you?" "It's only a few blocks." "Then I'll walk with you." "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to," he interrupted gently. "I want to, unless you'd prefer I didn't." And there it was again. A choice. He kept giving her choices, kept making it clear that she could walk away any time she wanted. The novelty of it made her chest ache. "You can walk with me," she heard herself say. They walked in silence, Hyun-woo matching his longer stride to hers. People moved out of their way on the sidewalk, and Serafina realized with a start that he radiated something that made others instinctively give him space. Power, maybe, or danger. Probably both. "Serafina," he said as they reached the library entrance, "I know this is unusual, but I'd like to see you again." "Why?" "Because I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since yesterday." He said it simply, like it was a fact rather than a confession. "Because when I close my eyes, I see the fear in yours, and I want to replace that with something better." Her breath caught. "I don't understand you." "You will, eventually." He pulled a card from his pocket and held it out to her. "My private number. Use it anytime." She took the card, their fingers brushing for just a second. Even that brief contact sent electricity up her arm. "I should go." "I know." But he didn't move, didn't look away. "Be safe, Serafina." Then he was walking back toward his car, and she was standing on the library. Steps with a business card burning a hole in her pocket, and her heart doing things it definitely shouldn't be doing. The rest of her shift passed in a fog. James tried to make conversation, but she barely heard him. Her mind was too busy replaying every moment with Hyun-woo, analyzing every word, every look. This was crazy. She was being crazy. She should throw away his card and forget him, and focus on putting her life back together without getting tangled up in someone clearly dangerous. But when she got home that evening, she found herself staring at his number. And when her phone buzzed with a text from another unknown number, her heart leaped before logic could catch up. I hope you made it home safely, LHW. She shouldn't respond, shouldn't encourage this, whatever this was. But her fingers moved anyway. I did. Thank you for lunch. It was my pleasure. Sleep well, Serafina. She stared at her phone screen until it went dark, then stared at the wall instead. This was dangerous. He was dangerous. But for the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was drowning. And maybe that was the most dangerous thing of all. A few days later, Serafina's fragile sense of normalcy shattered when she returned from her morning classes to find Mikkel waiting outside her building. Her first instinct was to run, but he spotted her before she could move. Serafina, wait. He looked rough, unshaven and rumpled, but his voice was pleading rather than angry. Please, I just want to talk. There's nothing to talk about. She kept her distance, keys clutched in her fists like a weapon. You need to leave. 5 minutes, just give me 5 minutes. No, I'm sorry, okay? He took a step closer, and she took a step back. I was drunk, I was stupid. It won't happen again. How many times had she heard that before? How many times had she believed it? Mikkel, we're done. Please leave. Is this because of him? His expression shifted, jealousy creeping into his features. That rich asshole from the restaurant? Are you with him now? That's none of your business. The hell it isn't. His voice rose, and suddenly he was the Mikkel she recognized. Angry, possessive, mean. You're my girlfriend. No, Serafina cut him off, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. I'm not anymore. You think he's going to want you? Mikkel laughed, harsh and bitter. Girls like you are a dime a dozen to guys like him. He'll get bored and throw you away, and then where will you be? The words hit their target, awakening every insecurity she'd tried to bury. But before she could respond, a familiar voice cut through the tension. Is there a problem here? Hyunwoo emerged from a car Serafina hadn't noticed parked nearby. He moved with that same controlled grace she remembered, but there was steel underneath it now. A warning. Mikkel's face went pale. You've got to be kidding me. You're stalking her now. I was in the neighborhood. Hyunwoo's tone suggested he didn't care whether Mikkel believed him or not. And it appears I arrived just in time. This is between me and my girlfriend. Ex-girlfriend, Serafina interjected, finding her voice. We're done, Mikkel. Serafina, she asked you to leave, Hyunwoo said quietly. I suggest you listen. Mikkel's hands clenched into fists, and for a moment Serafina thought he might actually be stupid enough to swing at Hyunwoo. But then his gaze darted to the car, to the driver standing beside it, to Hyunwoo's calm, expectant expression, and whatever fight he'd had in him seemed to drain away. This isn't over, Mikkel muttered, but he was already backing toward his own car. Yes, Hyunwoo corrected. It is. They watched him drive away in silence. Only when his car disappeared around the corner did Serafina realize she was shaking. Are you all right? Hyunwoo asked, his voice gentler now. You were in the neighborhood? She turned to face him, skepticism clear in her tone. Would you believe me if I said yes? No. Then I won't insult your intelligence by lying. He moved closer, and she caught the scent of expensive cologne and something uniquely him. I've had someone watching your building, making sure he didn't try anything. She should have been angry about that, should have been disturbed by the invasion of privacy, but all she felt was relief. You've been watching me. Protecting you. His gaze held hers steadily. There's a difference. Is there? With me? Yes. God, he was intense. Everything about him was too much, too focused, too powerful, too certain. And she was drawn to it like a moth to flame, even knowing she might get burned. I can take care of myself, she said, but the words felt hollow even to her own ears. I know you can. Hyunwoo's expression didn't change. But you shouldn't have to, not anymore. You can't just insert yourself into my life like this. Can I? The question hung between them, and Serafina realized with a jolt that he was asking for permission. Despite everything, the guards, the intervention, the protection, he was still giving her a choice. Why? The question felt like it was being torn from her chest. Why do you care so much? Hyun-woo was quiet for a long moment, and when he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that made her breath hitch. Because I see something in you that you don't see in yourself yet, and I want to be there when you finally do. Her throat tightened. You don't know me. Then let me learn. It was too much, too fast, too overwhelming. She was still trying to piece her life back together after Mikkel, still trying to figure out who she was without fear dictating her every move. She wasn't ready for someone like Hyun-woo, someone who looked at her like she was worth protecting, worth knowing, worth choosing. But maybe that was exactly why she needed him. I have to go, she whispered, because staying felt too dangerous. Thank you for everything, Serafina. He caught her hand as she turned, his touch warm and grounding. Don't disappear on me. I'm not disappearing, I need time to think. He studied her face, then nodded slowly and released her hand. Take all the time you need, but know that I'm not going anywhere. She fled into her building before she could do something stupid, like cry or kiss him or ask him to promise he'd never leave, because men like Lee Hyun-woo didn't make promises to girls like her. Did they? 2 weeks passed in a strange limbo. Mikkel stopped calling after the confrontation outside her building, though Serafina suspected Hyun-woo had something to do with his sudden disappearance. She should have been relieved, and part of her was... But another part felt oddly empty, like she'd lost something without gaining anything to replace it. Hyun-woo texted her every morning, nothing demanding or intrusive, just simple check-ins. Good morning, I hope you slept well, or have a good day at work. She never knew how to respond, so mostly she didn't, but she read every message, and she never deleted them. At the library, James had become more attentive, bringing her coffee, finding excuses to work the same shifts, asking if she wanted to grab dinner after work. He was sweet, uncomplicated, safe. Everything Hyun-woo wasn't. So there's this new Korean place that opened downtown, James said one afternoon while they were cataloging new arrivals. I heard they have amazing bulgogi. Want to check it out this weekend? Serafina looked up from the book she was scanning. Are you asking me on a date? He grinned, boyish and charming. Would you say yes if I was? James. I know. Bad timing. You just got out of a relationship. His expression turned more serious. But for what it's worth, I think you deserve someone who treats you right, and I'd like the chance to be that person. Her heart squeezed. He was nice, normal, the kind of guy she should want. But when she tried to, imagine sitting across from him at dinner. All she could see was dark eyes and a voice that promised protection and something in her chest that awakened only for someone else entirely. Let me think about it, she said finally. That's not a no. James's smile returned. I'll take it. That evening, Serafina's phone rang just as she was leaving work. Hyun-woo's name flashed on the screen and her stomach did that stupid fluttering thing it always did when she saw it. Hello? Serafina. His voice wrapped around her name like silk. Are you free tonight? Why? Because I'd like to see you. Straight to the point. No games. That was so fundamentally Hyun-woo it almost made her smile. I don't think that's a good idea. Why not? Because I'm starting to want things I shouldn't want. Because you scare me in ways I don't understand. Because I'm afraid of what happens if I let you get too close. Because we're different, she said instead. Is that really what you think? His tone suggested he knew it wasn't. Or are you afraid? Of you? Of yourself? The accuracy of his observation stole her breath. Yes, she was afraid. But not of him. Of the way she felt when he was near. Of the way she found herself thinking about him at odd moments. Of the way his protectiveness made her feel cherished instead of controlled. Serafina, Hyun-woo continued when she didn't respond. I'm not asking for forever. Just dinner. One evening. If afterward you want me to leave you alone, I will. You promise? I promise. A pause. But you should know. I'm hoping you won't want that. God help her, she was hoping that too. Okay, she heard herself say. One dinner. He picked her up an hour later in that same expensive car, but this time he got out and opened the door for her himself. He was dressed more casually than before, still polished, still expensive, but less intimidating, almost human. Almost. You look beautiful, he said as she slid into the passenger seat. Serafina glanced down at her simple dress and cardigan. I look normal. Beautiful, he repeated firmly. The restaurant he took her to was unlike anywhere she'd ever been. Exclusive, elegant, the kind of place where she'd never feel comfortable on her own. But with Hyun-woo beside her, with his hand resting lightly on the small of her back as they were led to their table, she felt safe, protected. Like she belonged simply because he'd decided she did. Tell me about yourself, he said once they'd ordered. Everything I don't know. That's everything. Then I have a lot to learn. So she told him about growing up in Malawi, about her family still back home, about coming to Korea for university and falling in love with the country despite the loneliness, about working at the library and studying literature and dreaming of becoming a teacher someday. Hyun-woo listened with complete focus, asking questions that showed he was actually paying attention, and when she finally ran out of things to say, he shared pieces of himself too. Not much, just glimpses. His mother, who died when he was young, his father's expectations, the weight of responsibility he'd carried since he was barely old enough to understand what it meant. Do you ever regret it? Serafina asked quietly. The life you have? Every day. His honesty surprised her. But regret doesn't change reality. And reality is that I'm good at what I do, even if what I do isn't always admirable. Are you a bad person? Hyun-woo considered this. I'm not a good person, he said finally, but I try to be good to the people I care about. And do you care about me? His gaze locked onto hers with an intensity that made her pulse spike. More than I should, probably. The air between them felt charged, electric. Serafina's hands trembled slightly as she reached for her water glass. This is crazy, she whispered. We barely know each other. So let's get to know each other. He leaned forward slightly. Give me time, Serafina. Let me prove that I'm worth the risk. And if you're not, then I'll walk away. I told you, the choice is always yours. They stayed until the restaurant began closing down around them, talking about everything and nothing. And when Hyun-woo finally drove her home, Serafina realized with a start that she hadn't thought about Mikkel once the entire evening, hadn't felt afraid or anxious or small. She just existed, and it had felt wonderful. Thank you, she said as he walked her to her door, for tonight. Thank you for giving me the chance. She should go inside, should say goodnight and create some distance before this went any further. But she found herself hesitating, lingering. Hyun-woo? Yes? Why me? Really? He was quiet for a moment, his expression unreadable in the dim hallway light. Because when I look at you, I see someone worth protecting, worth knowing, worth... He trailed off, then finished quietly. Worth everything. Her breath caught. I'm not. You are. He stepped closer, and she could feel the warmth radiating from him. You just don't see it yet, but you will. He raised his hand slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed his knuckles against her cheek. The gesture was achingly tender, and Serafina felt something crack open inside her chest. Good night, Serafina. Then he was gone, and she was standing in her doorway with her heart pounding, and the ghost of his touch still burning against her skin. The next day, James asked her again about dinner, and this time, Serafina knew what her answer had to be. I can't, she said gently. I'm sorry, but there's someone else. James's face fell, but he recovered quickly. The guy from before? The one who showed up at your building? Yes. Is he good to you? The question made her chest warm. He is. Then I guess I can't compete with that. James managed a smile. But if he ever messes up, you know where to find me. She appreciated his graciousness, even as guilt twisted in her stomach. But she'd learned the hard way that pretending to feel something you didn't only hurt everyone involved. Better to be honest now than lead him on. That evening, Hyun-woo texted her. "Dinner tomorrow?" "Yes." His response came immediately. "I'll pick you up at 7. She spent the next 24 hours in a state of anticipation that felt equal parts thrilling and terrifying. This was happening. She was actually doing this. Letting someone in, letting herself want something, letting herself believe that maybe she deserved good things. When Hyun-woo arrived the next evening, he wasn't alone. A woman in an elegant suit stood beside him, holding several shopping bags. "I hope you don't mind," Hyun-woo said at Serafina's confused expression. "I thought you might like some new clothes for tonight, but only if you want them." Serafina stared at the bags, then at him. "You bought me clothes?" "I had someone buy you clothes," he corrected. "There's a difference." "Hyun-woo, I can't accept. They're a gift. Accept them or don't, but at least look at them first." The woman smiled kindly and set the bags inside Serafina's apartment. "No pressure, dear, but Mr. Lee has excellent taste." She left, and Serafina looked through the bags with mounting disbelief. Everything was beautiful, expensive, perfectly her size. Dresses, shoes, a coat that probably cost more than her monthly rent. It was too much, way too much. But when she emerged 20 minutes later wearing one of the dresses, a deep blue that made her skin glow, the expression on Hyun-woo's face made her forget every objection. "Beautiful," he breathed. "I knew you would be." They went to a gallery opening of all places. Serafina had never been to anything so sophisticated, so glamorous. People greeted Hyun-woo with deference and curiosity, their eyes lingering on her with barely concealed interest. She felt out of her depth, overwhelmed by the attention. But Hyun-woo kept her close, his presence a steady anchor. And when someone made a comment about his lovely companion, he introduced her properly. Not as his date, not as someone temporary, but as Serafina, like her name was enough, like she was enough. "You're good at this," she observed quietly as they moved through the gallery. "At what?" "Making me feel like I belong." He looked at her, something fierce and protective flashing in his eyes. "You do belong. Anyone who suggests otherwise can answer to me." The possessiveness in his tone should have bothered her, but it didn't. Instead, it made her feel claimed, chosen, like he'd looked at the world and decided she was the one worth keeping. They were studying a painting when a man approached, his smile polished and his suit expensive. "Hyun-woo, I didn't expect to see you here." "Tae-yang." Hyun-woo's tone was cordial but cool. "How have you been?" "Excellent, excellent." The man's gaze slid to Serafina, interest sparking in his eyes. "And who is this lovely woman?" "Serafina," Hyun-woo said simply. "Ah." Tae-yang extended his hand and Serafina shook it politely. "Charmed. Are you an art enthusiast?" "Not really, I'm still learning." "Then allow me to educate you." Tae-yang's smile widened. "This particular artist is known for—" "Actually," Hyun-woo interrupted smoothly, "we were just leaving." Tae-yang's expression flickered with something that might have been amusement. "Of course. It was lovely meeting you, Serafina. Perhaps we'll run into each other again?" "Perhaps," she said, though Hyun-woo's hand had tightened almost imperceptibly on her waist. They left the gallery moments later, and Serafina could feel the tension radiating off Hyun-woo in waves. "Should I not have talked to him?" she asked carefully. "You can talk to whoever you want." His voice was controlled, but she heard the edge underneath. "I just didn't like the way he looked at you." "How did he look at me?" "Like he wanted something. That wasn't his." Oh, jealousy. Lee Hyun-woo was jealous. The realization sent a thrill through her that she probably shouldn't have felt. "And what makes you think I'm yours?" she asked, emboldened. Hyun-woo stopped walking and turned to face her fully. Nothing. Yet. But I'm working on it. The honesty in his answer stole her breath. You're very direct. I don't believe in wasting time pretending I feel things I don't. His gaze held hers steadily. I want you, Serafina. I think I've wanted you since the moment I saw you, and I don't like the idea of anyone else having the chance to make you smile the way you smiled at him just now. I was being polite. I know. It doesn't matter. I'm still jealous. She shouldn't find his possessiveness attractive. She'd spent years with Mikkel's toxic jealousy, walking on eggshells to avoid setting him off. But this was different. Hyunwoo wasn't trying to control her. He was just being honest about what he felt, and somehow that made all the difference. You're impossible, she whispered. Probably. He stepped closer and she could feel her heart attempting to escape her chest. But I'm also yours, if you want me. Did she want him? God, yes. More than she'd wanted anything in a long time. But wanting something didn't make it safe, didn't make it smart. I'm scared, she admitted quietly. Of me? Of this. Of how fast it's moving. Of how much She cut herself off, afraid to finish the thought. How much you... What? Hyunwoo prompted gently. How much I'm starting to feel for you. The confession felt like jumping off a cliff. It's terrifying. His expression turned unbearably tender. You think I'm not terrified too? You don't seem like someone who gets scared. I'm scared all the time. Scared I'll say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing, scare you away before you realize I'm worth staying for. She stared at him, this powerful, controlled man admitting to fear like it was nothing. Like vulnerability was just another fact. You are, she heard herself say, worth staying for. Something shifted in his eyes, something intense and hungry. Serafina, but I need time. I need to go slow. He nodded immediately. As slow as you need. Promise? I promise. He raised his hand to her face, cradling her cheek with a gentleness that made her want to cry. I'll wait as long as it takes. You're worth it. Then he leaned down and pressed his lips to her forehead, a kiss so tender it felt sacred. When he pulled back, Serafina's eyes were damp. Let me take you home, he said quietly. She nodded, not trusting her voice. But as they drove through the city streets, Serafina realized something that both thrilled and terrified her. She was falling for Lee Hyun-woo, and this time, she didn't think she wanted to fight it. Everything changed the following Tuesday. Serafina was shelving books in the library's back section when her phone rang with an unfamiliar number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Hello? Is this Serafina Banda? A woman's voice, professional and clipped. Yes? This is Detective Park from Seoul Metropolitan Police. I need to ask you some questions about Lee Hyun-woo. Serafina's blood ran cold. What? Why? Is he okay? He's fine, but we're investigating certain irregularities in his business dealings, and your name came up in connection with him. I'd like you to come down to the station. I don't understand. I haven't done anything wrong. No one is accusing you of anything. We just need your cooperation. Serafina ended the call with shaking hands and immediately dialed Hyun-woo's number. He answered on the first ring. Serafina? The police just called me. They want to question me about you. The words tumbled out in a rush. What's happening? There was a brief pause, then Hyun-woo's voice came through tight and controlled. Don't go anywhere. I'm sending someone to get you. Hyun-woo! Trust me, please. Just wait for my driver. The car arrived 15 minutes later. Instead of taking her to the police station, they drove to Hyun-woo's office building, a sleek high-rise in the heart of the financial district. She was escorted to the top floor, where Hyun-woo was waiting in a conference room with several serious-looking people in suits. Serafina. He crossed to her immediately, his hands gentle on her shoulders. Are you all right? What's going on? Sit down. I'll explain everything. And he did. His business empire, while legitimate on the surface, had connections to less savory enterprises. Someone was trying to bring him down, using fabricated evidence and testimonies, and somehow Serafina had been dragged into it, probably as leverage. They think if they can make you testify against me, they can build a case, Hyunwoo explained, his voice carefully neutral, or they're hoping I'll do something reckless to protect you. Will you? She asked quietly. Do something reckless? His jaw tightened. If it keeps you safe? Absolutely. One of the lawyers cleared his throat. Mr. Lee, perhaps it would be best if you created some distance from Ms. Banda, just temporarily, until this blows over. Serafina felt her heart drop. Distance. Of course. She'd known this was too good to be true, that someone like her would only ever be a liability to someone like him. No, Hyunwoo said flatly. The lawyer blinked. Sir, if they connect Ms. Banda to your business activities, they won't, because she has nothing to do with my business. Hyunwoo's tone left no room for argument, and I'm not abandoning her because someone is trying to manipulate me. Hyunwoo, Serafina said quietly. Maybe they're right. Maybe I should go home, to Malawi, just for a while. He turned to her so fast she took a step back. No, it might be safer. You're safest with me. But if being with you is what's putting me in danger, then I'll remove the danger. His eyes were fierce, determined. I'm not letting you go, Serafina. Not now. Not ever. The declaration hung in the air, and Serafina felt tears prick her eyes. He was willing to risk everything to keep her close. The realization was overwhelming. I don't want to be the reason you lose everything, she whispered. You won't be. He cupped her face in his hands, his touch achingly gentle. You're going to be the reason I keep everything. Because knowing you're waiting for me, that's what makes it all worthwhile. One of the lawyers coughed delicately. We should discuss actual strategy later, Hyunwoo cut him off. Right now I'm taking Serafina somewhere safe. He drove her to a penthouse apartment she'd never seen before, explaining it was one of several properties he owned throughout the city. This one was secure, private, untraceable to him, unless someone looked very hard. Stay here, he instructed as they entered the pristine space. I'll have food delivered, anything you need, but don't leave until I tell you it's safe. You're leaving? Panic flared in her chest. I have to handle this, but I'll be back. He pulled her close and she melted into his embrace. I promise, Serafina, I'll fix this, and then nothing will ever threaten you again. She wanted to believe him, but as the door closed behind him, leaving her alone in the too quiet apartment, doubt crept in. What if he couldn't fix it? What if being with her really did destroy him? What if she was better off disappearing before that could happen? The next 3 days were torture. Hyunwoo called regularly, his voice steady and reassuring even when she could hear the stress underneath. But he wouldn't tell her details, wouldn't let her see how bad things really were, and that scared her more than anything. On the 4th day, Mikkel called. She didn't know how he'd gotten her new number, but his voice on the other end of the line made her stomach turn. Serafina, we need to talk. How did you get this number? I have friends who've taken an interest in your new boyfriend. He paused meaningfully. Powerful friends. The kind who could make your life very difficult unless you're willing to help them. Ice flooded her veins. What do you want? Information about Lee Hyunwoo, where he is, who he's meeting with, what he's planning. I don't know anything about his business. Then find out, or your boyfriend goes to prison. Your choice. The line went dead, and Serafina sank to the floor with her phone still clutched in her hand. This was her fault, all of it. If she'd never let Hyunwoo into her life, never let herself fall for him, none of this would be happening. She had to leave, had to disappear before she became the weakness that destroyed him. It would kill her, but at least he'd be safe. At least she wouldn't be responsible for his downfall. By evening, she'd made her decision. She left the penthouse and headed to the airport using what little money she had saved to book the first flight to Malawi. She didn't call Hyunwoo, couldn't bear to hear his voice knowing she was about to break both their hearts. but she'd barely made it through security when strong hands gripped her shoulders and turned her around. Hyunwoo stood there, his expression a mix of fury and devastation. "What are you doing?" His voice was low, dangerous. "Leaving. It's better this way." "Better for who?" "For you." The words burst out of her. "I'm the weakness they're using against you. If I'm gone..." "If you're gone, nothing else matters." He pulled her closer, his grip almost painful. "Do you understand that? None of it. The business, the power, the empire, none of it means anything without you." "You're not thinking clearly." "I'm thinking perfectly clearly." His eyes bored into hers. "I love you, Serafina, and I'm not letting you run away because you're scared." The confession stole her breath. "You... what?" "I love you. I've loved you since that first day in the restaurant when I saw you trying so hard to be brave. And I'll love you when we're old and gray, and this is all ancient history." His voice turned fierce. "So you're not leaving. You're coming home with me, and we're going to face this together." Tears streamed down her face. "I don't want to lose you." "You won't. I promise." He pressed his forehead to hers. "Trust me, Serafina. Please." She did. God help her, she did. They left the airport together, and Hyunwoo took her back to the penthouse. Then he told her everything. The evidence he'd gathered against his enemies, the deals he'd made, the threats he'd neutralized. It had taken days of careful maneuvering, but he'd done it. The investigation was dropping, his enemies were retreating, and she was safe. "How?" she breathed. "I told you, you're worth everything." His smile was tired but genuine. "And I always keep my promises. Even if it costs you? Especially then." She kissed him and whispered against his mouth, "I love you, too. I think I have from the beginning." His arms tightened around her. "Say it again." "I love you, Lee Hyun-woo." Again. "I love you." Once more. She laughed, the sound wet with tears. "I love you, I love you. I'll say it as many times as you need to hear it. Forever might not be enough." 6 months later, Serafina stood in front of a mirror wearing a white dress that made her feel like a princess. Outside the room, she could hear the gentle murmur of wedding guests gathering. Her family had flown in from Malawi, marveling at the lavish ceremony Hyun-woo had planned. His associates filled the other half of the chapel, a strange mix of legitimate businessmen and people she suspected were decidedly less legitimate. But none of that mattered, because when the doors opened and she walked down the aisle, Hyun-woo was waiting for her with an expression of such pure love and devotion that it took her breath away. "You look perfect," he whispered when she reached him. "So do you." They exchanged vows in front of everyone who mattered, promising forever and meaning it. And when Hyun-woo kissed his bride, and Serafina knew with absolute certainty that this was where she was meant to be. A year later, she placed his hand on her growing belly and watched his eyes fill with wonder. "We're having a baby," she whispered. Hyun-woo dropped to his knees, pressing a kiss to her stomach. "A baby," he repeated, his voice thick with emotion. "Our baby. Are you happy?" He looked up at her, and the love in his eyes was answer enough. "I've never been happier. You gave me everything I never knew I needed." She ran her fingers through his hair, her heart so full it ached. We gave each other everything. And that, Serafina thought as Hyun-woo rose and pulled her into his arms, was the truth. Love hadn't conquered just the obstacles in their path. It had conquered the fear, the doubt, the voice that said they didn't belong together. It had proven that sometimes the most unlikely connections were the strongest, that protection could be love's greatest expression, and that choosing someone every single day was the most powerful thing two people could do. They'd started with a threat in a restaurant and a stranger's intervention, and they'd ended with a promise, a child, and a love that would outlast them both. Love stories like this remind us that the right person will fight for you, not against you. If this story touched your heart, go ahead and hit that like button. It really helps me know what kind of stories you want to see more of. And don't forget to subscribe because I've got so many more emotional journeys coming your way that'll have you feeling all the feels.